from the Washington, D.C. area. It's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Hi folks, Cesar here with you again. We've got an interesting show this evening. I'm kind of torn about it. It's about gun violence. Once again, we're dealing with this. I quite frankly call this an insane topic. It seems that nothing much changes except the names of the victims. And I've got a whole bunch of guests lined up to kind of bring some focus and clarity and maybe some hope to dealing with this in our country here. Just some numbers for you. An estimated 32,000 people a year in the US of A are killed through gun violence. Another 55 every day commit suicide. There's a tie here, folks, and we're going to talk about this very complex issue. And I think what will come out of it is hopefully a path forward that all of us can hang some hope on. My first guest is Jim Sollo. He is a board member, returning guest with the Virginia Center for Public Safety. Jim, thank you so much for coming back in and talking about this.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show, Scott.
Absolutely. Again, I called it insanity, right? I mean, it's the same thing, except the names of the victims.
Yeah, here we go again, right? I mean, we see this time after time after time after time, and if you listen to the gun lobby, they say, "Oh, gee, it's too bad, but nothing can be done." You know,
you can get more. You can get a gun.
Yeah.
Let's put more guns.
Yeah. What the problem is, not enough guns, right? So we don't think that's a very realistic or adult solution to the problem.
So what are some of the things that you guys are focusing on and kind of help?
Well, you know, background checks are something that we know that works, and in this case, there were obviously some problems with the background check.
Right. And just for the folks at home, apparently the process worked up until a point where it seems like the federal database didn't get a hit on the mental conditioning or the mental institutionalization of this individual. Yeah. And that's where it seemed to fall through.
Yeah, I think that was the case in the Charleston shooting.
Correct.
And I think, Director Comey from the FBI actually apologized because the system didn't work the way it should.
Right.
And you know, some of this is just bureaucratic number checking, putting the right block on and a clerk seeing that a particular place was checked. And people are human, so mistakes are going to be made. And some of the states are not really very good at doing the background checks. The federal government has given many of the states lots of money. I think $58 million was one of the figures that I think I've seen. To improve their background check system. We're lucky here in Virginia in that our officials, the state police, are extremely conscientious. We're one of the best, if not the best state in terms of conscientiously doing the background checks, but not all states are that good. Right. And I saw some figures today. I think the state of Massachusetts, that you'd like to think was pretty good, was given millions of dollars and only put about 10 or 12 names into the system. So states are clearly not using the money for what it was intended. And there may be some ways around that where the federal government could incentivize the states to do a better job of doing these background checks. Right now, there are no penalties for not doing the background checks well. So some of the things I've seen recently is some ideas that have been kicked around is, well, what about if the federal government penalize the states by taking away money for other programs unless they conscientiously did their background checks?
Sure.
So that's one of the things they're thinking about.
Well, let me just throw this out because I'm pretty much fed up with the whole topic. As far as penalties, there are penalties. People die. Yeah. So how about the releasing of every name, every day, every week, every month, reminding state legislators what's really happening within their state. I mean, if you get that sort of focus, that sort of visibility, then something may happen. I mean,
well, I don't know. One year, what our organization did is we put together for a whole year all of the gun violence stories, all of the killings, all of the assaults that were done with weapons, and we created this book. 500 pages, and we gave that to every representative in Richmond. Had absolutely no effect. Yeah. Okay. Regrettably, people are immune. It's hard to believe that people are immune to this, but I've talked to legislators who well, I'm sorry that so-and-so died, but that's not my problem.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to get legislators to pay attention.
So that's part of the frustration, right? It's Second Amendment, trumps everything apparently. But where in the Second Amendment does it say, I mean, I get the whole regulated militia, you have the right to bear arms, but there has to be some sort of qualifier for people that just quite frankly can't function in society.
Yeah. Well,
there has to be some sort of qualifier that disqualifies a person
that should, yeah,
based upon their mental capacity to determine right and wrong.
Yeah.
Why is that such a hurdle for folks that are so advocating on the Second Amendment portion? I mean, why is that such a difficult concept to?
Well, I don't think it is a difficult concept, okay, but you have to remember there's money involved.
Sure.
And so the National Rifle Association and the gun lobby generally is funded by the gun manufacturers, and they're in the business of selling guns.
Sure.
And so the business of selling guns, making money off of guns, giving money to politicians who support their position, it's kind of a vicious circle kind of thing. So there's no real incentive on the part of some people in political life to actually do anything about the problem. In fact, they do better if no one does anything about the problem.
I read a stat where 1 in 3 Americans, that's a third of the population, know someone that has been shot.
Yeah.
I find that completely outrageous.
Well, if you go to, sometimes they ask young kids in inner city schools, how many of you young people have known somebody who've been shot? And 3/4 of the hands will go up. I mean, it's scary. I mean, there was a shooting in Norfolk, and I saw, a father say, geez, I'm afraid to have my 8-year-old go out and ride his bicycle on the street because he might get shot, because there were some random shots in the neighborhood, and somebody did get shot. So, in some cases, we're turning some of our urban areas into killing zones, and that's really scary for a democratic society.
Yeah, I mean, look, I struggle with why we're still facing the issue. And again, I'm not talking about taking guns away from anyone that is certainly of sound mind and body.
Yeah.
You want to hunt, go hunt.
Yeah.
You want to shoot, go shoot the range and do whatever it is that makes you feel fulfilled. But I mean, we can all agree that we're not living out on the prairies anymore.
Correct.
We don't all need massive weaponry.
Yeah, you don't need an assault weapon to go hunting,
And that's the thing, right? I mean, there's certainly a time and place for that, and I certainly respect someone who wants that. But, there's just a certain level of I guess, rationalization.
Yeah, and responsibility, right? Yeah, I know. No, but if you go, I go to gun shows fairly regularly, and I was into a gun shop actually back in April, and what's interesting to me is how the gun culture is kind of changing, because when you go into America's Gun Show at the Dulles Expo Center in Chantilly, the first thing you see is row after row after row of assault weapons, and when I was into a gun show or a gun shop a couple of months ago, it's interesting. They used to have, Glocks and small handguns and whatever. Now they've got the scariest weapons you can find, because those are the weapons that apparently some people in the gun culture really want. They want those scary-looking weapons. And you go into the gun show and you think you were, arming a couple of battalions of infantry. I mean, more gun shows than when I was in the Army, that's for sure.
So at some point, obviously as technology improves, as we move into the future, there are going to be more and more weapons that are capable of inflicting more and more
horrific damage.
Yeah. So today, I'm pretty sure I can purchase a bazooka in the state of Virginia. Does that sound right? So let's really stop and think about that.
Do you really need that weapon?
Right. I mean, it's great that we have that freedom, but I mean, come on.
Yeah. What is reasonable?
What am I going to hunt with a bazooka?
Exactly.
Right. I mean, and I
some
always,
of these high-powered assault.
I have this great debate with my friends that are hunters. I challenge them to go hunting with me, because real men hunt with bare feet and bare hands.
Yeah.
That's a real man hunting for his prey.
Well,
so I challenge the hunters.
Well, I used to be a hunter as a kid, and I was in the infantry when I was in the Army. So, and I've been around guns, and I own a gun. Okay, but there's just sort of this proliferation of these horrific weapons that are out on the streets there. I mean, the police are often outgunned, and so is the military. When this young kid came into in Chattanooga, and apparently, the gun lobby's theory is more people with guns will shoot the bad guys. Sure. That's what Rick Perry said about the shooting in the movie theater. Sure, what you'd want to have is a shootout in a dark movie theater, right? Sure. Oh, nobody would get hurt.
Just spray lead and
only the bad guy. And only the bad guy would
get
shot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But in the military situation, it was interesting because one of the military guys at the gate when the assailant came in did have a gun and did fire that weapon at the bad guy, obviously to no effect. Okay, so to me, there's this Hollywood view that, well, the good guys win all the shootouts. Well, obviously that did not happen in the Chattanooga case, where you have a military guy shooting at a bad guy, and that was supposed to be the end of the situation. Well, it didn't work out that way. So,
clearly, it's not the answer. More guns are not the answer. So I think my challenge for the viewers, the voters, is to really ask themselves, what does a solution look like? Yeah. Because it is not doing what we've been doing, the status quo. We need something new, something, quite frankly, innovative to deal with this. What are you all doing? What sort of help do you need? What sort of things would you like to see?
We need people to pay attention to the issue, and we need people to vote. That's critical to the issue. Also, California, a place where there's a lot of innovation, they have a law called GVRO, Gun Violence Restraining Order, and it permits family members, close friends, to go to a judge and get somebody adjudicated as irresponsible, and therefore their guns are to be removed, and they go on a list where if the NICS system is done correctly, will not be able to purchase a gun. And we think that would have prevented this latest shooter in Lafayette, Louisiana. His family was very concerned about him, very concerned about his mental state. His ex-wife had taken away all of his guns. And so the family should have been able, if they had a GVRO, a gun violence restraining order, the family under those conditions would have been able to take away or see that he could not get any weapons.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Sounds very reasonable to me.
We're gonna thank you for coming on the show. We're gonna be talking about this for a long time, and quite frankly, stick around. We'll be talking later, folks. I want to thank Jim for coming on the show, and we'll be right back.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here again talking about gun violence. My next guest is a good friend of mine. Full disclosure, I've contributed to his campaign. He's a great guy. You've seen him. He started me off on this program, Inside Scoop. I learned a lot from this gentleman. He is the Democratic nominee for the 45th House of Delegate District, Mark Levine. Sir, thank you so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Sir, you
on my old show.
On your old show.
I began back in 2005.
Actually, and witnessed the results.
Yeah.
We're all looking for you. We're looking for you to pin some hope on bringing some sanity to this craziness. I mean, it's big. It's the NRA. It's education. It's healthcare. How are we going to begin to address this thing?
Well, let's start with gun violence, because obviously that's what you talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a certain feeling among the political chattering classes that there's nothing you can do on guns, that this is an impossible thing. It goes back to Al Gore's election in 2000. He didn't win Tennessee, supposedly because of the NRA. Of course, he actually did win the election. He just wasn't allowed to sit. That's another battle I fought.
We'll bring you back to that
ago.
discussion.
Yeah,
sure.
but after Newtown, after all those little children were massacred, it was felt, okay, this is the time we're going to do something. And of course, President Obama tried and did not succeed. And I think since that time, particularly, there's this idea, okay, nothing can be done. Just give up. Just give up. Let all the insane people own guns. Let all the terrorists own guns. Let all the domestic violence people own guns. 30,000 Americans will die. We just have to accept that.
Sure.
And yet...
That's very pro-life, by the way.
Well... 3,000 Americans died on September 11th in a horrific massacre, and we went to war. We wars that still last to this day. Spent trillions of dollars. 3,000 Americans are massacred every month in this country by gun violence. And here's what I find that's so surprising, Cesar. I find that even those on the right, even Republicans, even conservatives, are willing to compromise on this issue as long as we liberals say, we're not going to take away your guns, as long as you're sane. You got to be sane, folks. Sorry, you got to be mentally of sound mind, not a criminal, not a terrorist. If you're not a terrorist and you're not a criminal and you're sane, we think you should be able to take a test, a safety test, like you do when you drive a car. We have requirements to get a driver's license. Everyone has to basically take a driving test. It's pretty simple, but you got to take the test. You know why they require?
So you don't kill other people on the road,
That's
Mark.
exactly right. The reason we take a get a driver's test is because cars can kill people.
Sure.
Now, the Lafayette killer, and I make a practice never to say their names.
Amen.
The Lafayette killer, who some might call him the Tea Party terrorist. He was a Tea Party member. He loved Hitler. He liked the Ku Klux Klan. He's as much a member of any hate group as, frankly, the Tennessee killer or the Charleston killer. This guy legally bought a gun.
Yes.
Even though he'd been involuntarily committed
by his family.
To a mental hospital because he was violent and threatening to kill people. Even though he had a criminal record. And here's what's so surprising. He was legally able to buy a gun. In Alabama, the laws are, if you've committed a crime and if you've been involuntarily committed in a mental hospital, there's some technical questions about how the judge filled out the form, but basically the judge didn't do anything wrong. In Alabama, if you've done these things, you can't get a concealed carry permit, but you can openly carry the gun. Virginia has a similar ridiculous process. It says that in order to carry a gun concealed, you have to pass an internet test. You have to spend all of half an hour online. That's what you have to do. By the way, most states require you actually have some real gun training. That's to carry it concealed. But if you want to carry your AR-15, like the Tennessee terrorist, and you want to go around in your car and start shooting up military facilities, that's okay in Virginia. That's perfectly fine. Anyone can sell you a gun. And here's what I find that's hopeful, because I want to give people some hope.
Sure.
I was in Denver. I was at the Western Conservative Summit. I was one liberal surrounded by 5,000 conservatives. It's the second largest national conservative convention in the country after CPAC. And I was debating guns. Frankly, I felt a little nervous. I thought someone might take a shot at me. And here's what I found. The people there, in Colorado at least, are so proud of their prowess with guns, they don't mind being required to take a gun safety course. They don't mind having a sanity check. They don't mind. I had an NRA instructor tell me, well, of course you should have to have a background check. Well, of course you should have to be able to know what you're doing with a gun. All of my people, I require them to do that. And I say, good for you. We're not enemies. We're not enemies even of all the NRA. One more statistic. 90% of Americans support a background check for all gun purchases. 75% of NRA members, 3/4 of NRA members support universal background checks because most sane people that own guns and have no criminal record don't want insane terrorists with criminal records owning guns.
So is the gun lobby that powerful that it trumps and overrides all that sanity?
Well, I mean, they're pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, I don't take money from them. I will never take money from them. But the way the system works in Virginia, frankly, we pay our legislators so little that people rely on donations. And a lot of, particularly Republicans, but some Democrats too, in the Virginia legislature, in the General Assembly, take a lot of money from the gun lobby. But here's the thing. Gun owners. We should never confuse the gun lobby with gun owners because the majority of gun owners, 3/4 of them, are rational about this. And it's only a very, very, very few really, I don't understand these individuals who will say, yeah, 30,000 deaths, I don't care. I really want that insane person to own a gun. I'll tell you something, I have never, and I've talked about guns on my show, my radio show for 12 years since I've been doing a radio show. I've never had a single person tell me they want to make it easier for a criminal to get a gun. They want to make it easier for someone who's insane to get a gun, or even easier for a terrorist to own a gun. And yet the laws are right there. It's very, very simple to stop this. Why won't people do that?
Well, again, I think you'll be down in Richmond seeing it firsthand.
That's true.
Living it firsthand.
Maybe I'm new enough that I still believe we can do something.
We have
about
hope
this.
that you will, Mark.
I'm going to do my best.
I mean, that to me, it's depressing because it's, as I said before, the only thing that changes is the names and the number of victims.
And the locations.
Yeah.
And apparently theaters are now the newest thing. And for those who say, well, it shouldn't have been a gun-free zone, think about what they're expecting. They're expecting, Cesar, that every theater goer, we have to put on body armor before we go to the theater. We have to pack our AR-15 in our, we got our popcorn in our Twizzlers, and we got our AR-15, and there's a theater, and it's dark, and when we hear gunshots ring out, we're supposed to, first of all, figure out what's going on because we're watching a movie, right? We're in a different frame of mind. Find a gun instead of the candy in our pocket. Find the shooter in a smoke-filled, dark auditorium. Shoot only the shooter. Don't shoot any of the hundreds of people running around in a panic. Shoot them, and pulling out our gun when the police come. Be careful that they don't think we're the shooter because we're out there with a gun shooting in the theater. That's their solution. That is not a rational solution.
No.
Plus, the killers all the time wear body armor themselves because that's legal, and it shouldn't be, as far as I'm concerned, except for police and the military.
So to keep getting depressed about this, let's bring it home. Let's bring it to Virginia. Let's bring it to some of the things. I mean,
we had Virginia Tech, and it's just a matter of time before the next mass shooting happens here. It just is. Because
it's really a big issue, Mark. I mean, it's not just the gun sort of oversight or safety. It's mental illness. It's education. It's, if you invest in pre-K, you may save a child or some young adult going forward. There seems to be a safety net with a lot of holes for the folks that have mental issues that end up possessing these weapons. And unless you have a complete, comprehensive solution, that is going to require some investment.
Here's what I find so interesting. So when the people who really, the gun lobby, when the gun lobby gets this issue, they say, no, don't do background checks for the mentally ill. Help solve mentally ill problems. Help care for the mentally ill. And we liberals say, great,
yeah, sure.
Let's care for the mentally ill. Okay, conservatives, let's care for the mentally ill. They say, no, that costs too much money.
Right.
So they say, no background checks, care for the mentally ill. And then they say, no, that costs too much money.
Because I don't want to pay any taxes.
Prior to Ronald Reagan, we did care for the mentally ill. In fact, there were very few homeless on our streets.
St. Elizabeth downtown.
That's right. There were places for them to go. I firmly believe in mental health parity. Mental health is a condition. It's a physiological condition. It's not that someone chooses to go insane. It's just like if you've got strep throat, you need pills, right? Well, sometimes if your physiology and your mind is off, you need pills, you need medication. Maybe if this person had been on medication, other people would be alive today.
Sure. No,
so that's something we have to care for, and totally apart from gun violence.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm a firm believer that healthcare is a human right.
But there's a vector here, right? And it meets with the individual that has obtained a gun, that has mental issues, in a theater deciding it's good to shoot people.
Well, look, part of me says, while we absolutely need care for every mentally ill person, there's always going to be mental illness. Every society has mental illness, every country, every socioeconomic class, every race. So at the very, very least, no matter what we do with mental illness, we've got to keep people who are not in their right minds from owning this very destructive weapon. And when you phrase it that way, even NRA members agree. So then you have to ask, what's holding us back? And the arguments you hear are, well, enforce current laws. Well, in Alabama, they did enforce current laws. Right. And he still got a gun. Yeah. So that isn't the answer. And then you hear, well, you're going to try to take away our guns. Just remind them, no, if you're sane, not a criminal, not a terrorist, we're not going to take away your guns.
You haven't abused your spouse.
Right.
I mean, these are some common sense
Here's what I find very interesting about all three cases. In South Carolina, the killer's friend took away his gun. Gave it back to him only because he feared the law would be against him for taking away his gun. Oh. Same's true in Louisiana. The ex-wife took away the man's gun. She knew that he was dangerous. We find case after case of people knowing a crime is about to happen. They take away the gun, and the laws protect the shooter. They protect the murderer. They protect the killer. One thing we should be able to do is have a law that says if you take away someone's gun because you fear a violent act, you're protected under that.
Whistleblower.
Something like that. Call the police, tell them you took away someone's gun. Wouldn't that be great?
Mark, thank you so much for coming in.
Always a pleasure.
Good luck in Richmond.
You.
We're rooting for you. And obviously we'll keep supporting you, my friend.
Appreciate it, Cesar.
Sir, always a pleasure. Folks, Mark Levine will be right back with our next guest on more of this topic.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity.
Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has the drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar back with you. I'm here with Lori Haas. She is the Virginia State Director for the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. Lori, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you so much for joining us on this really tough topic. We have a problem with gun violence in America here, and I know you all are working really hard to try to provide a free society, free from gun violence, quite frankly, and you've been working with a broad coalition of folks. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing and some of the things that keep you motivated in what is, quite frankly, a very depressing battle here. So
It is a difficult battle, and I would say at times very emotional, and maybe you would go so far as to say depressing, but the difference in the climate between 2007 after my daughter was shot and injured at Virginia Tech, and now is greatly different. The number of people who are involved, the number of people who are committed to raising their voices on this issue, and the number of people contacting their legislators is I don't know how many times over what it used to be. The level of awareness, frankly, by the media and pundits and those who want to weigh in, editorial boards, the knowledge base is much, much greater by the general public. So, we're going to, continue to move the ball in this area. The gun violence prevention movement is as robust and as big as I've ever seen it. And I think that we are going to move the ball. We're going to make strides, all the time. And we have at the state level. We absolutely have at the state level. It's hard to remember that at times like this when we have mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting in a matter of weeks,
so Lori,
in a church, against, yes, go ahead.
No, I wanted to kind of hit that point. You've got a large group of concerned citizens. What's preventing movement on this? I mean, I know Richmond, we just had Mark Levine on, is going to be going down to the House of Delegates down there. Obviously, if he wins his election, I think he'll win. So that'll be a very strong voice. But what sort of message, what's the reception been like to some of the existing legislators? Can you give the audience a little bit of insight on what that discussion's been like?
The Virginia General Assembly is a very partisan House, and we bump into House of Delegate members, we bump into Senate members. We have some supporters on both sides of the aisle. There are very few, frankly, on the Republican side of the aisle. I think that has changed over time. I think as the Republican Party has become more extreme, there are members of the Republican Party who, frankly, understand common sense regulation. Regulation works, but they're afraid of a primary. In Virginia, we've had a primary challenger to Leader Cantor and Cantor lost. So the politics, of the gerrymandered districts, when you have a district in Virginia that is, 60, 70, 80, 90% Republican, and the voices in that district that are the most loud are the very, very strident voices on the far right. Legislators are not inclined to move towards the middle. The regulations that we have put forth in front of the Virginia General Assembly are common sense regulations. You've talked about them on your show tonight, and they enjoy, 80 plus percent, depending upon the poll that yes. So we're going to move the ball. We've moved it in some areas. We're going to keep working hard.
What sort of outreach have you seen effective on some of these people in terms of growing your coalition and taking that message? Because obviously, it's not just one or two or a handful of people. I mean, you've probably got a machine behind you that helps you get this message and helps basically write letters to their representatives. Is that going well? I mean, where?
I think so. I think there's more and more people engaged, more and more people involved, writing letters to the editor, writing their legislator, their congressman, or both. I think there are people who are engaged in coming down to Richmond to testify. You know, we keep track of all the legislation. We follow 50, 60 gun bills every session. And I think the thing that will move these legislators the most is hearing from their own constituents in their own districts. You know, I think it's up to, frankly, those 75% of responsible gun owners, those probably 85% of responsible gun owners who understand that regulations work. You know, we regulate those bazookas you talked about earlier in the show. And when was the last time we had a mass shooting with a bazooka?
Right.
No one can remember, no one can recall, because we highly regulate them. You can transfer them in the state of Virginia as you can in other states, but the regulatory process is thorough and complete and takes several days to several months. And once you complete everything that is required of you by the federal government, and you can complete that sale. So regulation works. We know it works. We just need to do a better job.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I use that as an extreme example. I mean, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I get that. But I don't get how that transfers to a bazooka. And I think when you talk to some of the people down in Richmond, it's a binary decision. You're either completely in or you're completely against the Second Amendment. And I guess for me, I still struggle with, you know, why we've had this discussion for so many years and nothing really seems to change. But I'm certainly comforted in what you're telling me, that you're reaching a lot more people that probably I was aware of. What are some of the things that your organization, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, what are sort of some of the things that you can use help with?
You know, we work at the state level. We work at the federal and state level. I particularly work at the state level in Virginia. And, you know, we do need people to show up in person, you know, down at the Virginia General Assembly. They're in session from January 15th to, say, the first week in March. And, you know, the more people we have at our supporters we have down there, the better off we are. We have an annual vigil to remember the victims of gun violence on Martin Luther King holiday. And we remember, you know, his leadership, his nonviolent leadership, you know, to affect social change. And he was gunned down. So on that day, we remember not only Martin Luther King, but all the victims of gun violence in Virginia. And we host the vigil, and then we go inside the building and we lobby our legislators. We lobby, you know, the House and the Senate. And over the years, that event has grown, you know, by the hundreds. But we want 100 more this year. We want 500 more next year. We want the movement to continue to grow, and we want people to understand that, you know, you can have protests and you can have rallies and you can have vigils and you can have prayers, but until you get in front of the people who make the laws, who make the rules of the road, who affect the policies that dictate who can and can't have guns, and, you know, keep guns from private, dangerous individuals, you know, we're going to continue to see the level of gun violence that we see now. Gun deaths in Virginia now outpace motor vehicle deaths, and they have for the last 2 years running.
Wow.
And that's a shame.
Yeah, that actually is. Yeah, when you put it into context like that. So just help me and some of the folks at home understand the conversation, the process, where when you're bringing up sensible, common sense gun laws, like you know, background check, universal background checks for criminals and mentally ill, you know, 1 gun per month, or limit the high capacity, you know, clips and assault weapons. What's the pushback like on something like that?
The binary, you know, purview of the Second Amendment that you talked about, you know, there's an all or nothing sort of mentality among those that consider themselves quote unquote supporters of the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. I don't understand it. You know, we regulate everything in this country and to great effect. I have a new granddaughter. I don't want her playing with toys that the buttons fall off and she could choke on. And I'm glad we regulate teddy bears. But, the gun industry, through their gun lobby, has, made certain that our elected officials are afraid of them. And, much to the chagrin of what we know, and we know better, we have an elected official, Tim Kaine. He has an F rating from the NRA. And despite that, he's won every office he's ever run for in Virginia, from mayor and city council to lieutenant governor, governor, and now senator. The gun lobby is not as influential as they'd like everyone to believe they are. And I think once our elected officials realize that and step foot out front of the gun lobby and say that, enough is enough, I think more and more of their colleagues will understand that the political influence of the gun lobby is waning. They don't spend money on anyone but incumbents and incumbent winners that they feel like are a sure win. So they're not really putting themselves out there. They like to threaten and they like to bully our elected officials, and I think we can change that tide. I think we have in Virginia. And look at 2013, our 3 statewide offices went to candidates who loudly and very proudly supported gun violence prevention. They talked at every turn about universal background checks. They talked at every turn about preventing domestic abusers easy access to firearms. They talked at every turn about protecting our children and keeping our homes safe. So, it's just a slog, and it's slow moving, way too slow moving for my taste, way too slow moving for most Virginians.
And I think you hit it right on. And there's a reason why at the state level, those individuals won, because it's a sum up of the entire state. Back to your point, you mentioned the whole redistricting, gerrymandering.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That is, quite frankly, where this is going to have to change, in my humble opinion. Unless,
I agree with you. I told people many times over, if I was not so fully engaged on this issue and working, sometimes 24/7 on it, I would be working on redistricting. And it's it's a real desire of mine to make certain that we are electing people to represent us, that our elected officials are not picking their voters.
Bingo. And for the folks at home, it's exactly that, where the elected officials have basically picked who they want in what neighborhoods and what households to vote for them. And that's why you have such a crazy map of the districts.
You're exactly correct. And it could, foster competition, which fosters, a lot more movement on people, a lot more compromise, a lot more conversation. So I think in Virginia, we've got some good signs that are sending us in the direction of correcting some of the redistricting problems with the court case that is making its way.
Thank you so much. We'll be back. Lori Haas, thank you.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo.
I would like to speak English better.
Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
Por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
el Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
Capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals.
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
Are a small part of what we do.
son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
Para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia,
comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Hey, Lena, where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here. Welcome back to our last segment. I'm joined by a good friend, repeat guest here on Inside Scoop, Kevin Bergen. He is with the Brady campaign. I'm sorry, I was going to read your title, the Public Health and Safety Coordinator. But he has a background that might be applicable here, very much so. He's a retired Air Force colonel, and he served 15 years as a probation parole officer. Kevin, thank you so much for coming back.
My pleasure. Nice to see you again, Cesar.
Always a pleasure having you here. I've said it before. It seems the only things that we're talking about are the changes that happen are the victims' names, the places, and the assailants. How are we making progress on this, in your opinion?
I have a particular program of interest to me, the ASK program, and there has been great progress with the ASK program. There's no downside to it. It's simple to understand and it's simple to support. And it's not a left-right, it's not a Republican-Democrat, it's not a red-blue. It's something everybody can support because we're going to save children's lives if people will ask. Ask what? Ask if there are guns in the home before you send a child to a home they haven't visited before. Oh. We're making great progress in that regard. And I'm very excited about the numerous places that we can go, schools, sure. PTAs, churches, social organizations.
That'll bring awareness. That's innovative, quite frankly. How's that going?
I'm very excited. I really am. I want to get into as I said, the school system. I want to engage the Catholic Church. I heard with a previous guest, someone used the term right to life. And I got a letter published in the Arlington Catholic Herald taking the Catholic Church to task because, to my way of thinking, their right to life is the abortion issue, right. Maybe a little bit on the death penalty. I've never seen the word gun violence, right. Prevent gun violence. Yeah. So I got that letter published. I got no pushback, but I would like to get into the Catholic schools with the sure. ASK program. I would like to see them more involved.
Are you getting any pushback in the public school system at all, or?
I didn't get any pushback, but I didn't get any support either. I contacted 3 PTAs in my neighborhood in Fairfax County with emails to the PTA presidents of those 3 schools, and I heard nothing back. The first one, I sent another email and said, I'm sorry, is there a protocol I should have followed that I did not follow?
Sure.
Let me know and I will do that, but this is an important message to get into your school. I've spoken to the state PTA representative and she said, Kevin, something you have to understand. These people are volunteers, they get hundreds of emails, they're raising families. You may have been deleted before you were even read.
Interesting.
So I am now in the process of contacting the school board Good. And see if I can get in by contacting and working through the school board and go up-down as opposed to down-up.
I think that's the way to do it. And if you need help with any of the school board people, let me know. We can certainly bring them on here. And
I will.
We got a few. I know we've supported a few that are running for the district nomination or the district school board position. I'm encouraged by that. That's actually.
I am too. I was discouraged. I went to Lobby Day. Laurie told you about Lobby Day, January in Richmond, and I went to that. And when we left and were driving home, I said, why would anybody do this? Every bill that came up, that had a chance of reducing gun violence was defeated. And every bill that would probably increase the possibility of gun violence was approved. And I'm saying, why come down here and get beat up like that? Mm-hmm. But now I'm encouraged with this program, sure. and I want to see it take off.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're going to own, if you're going to be pro-life, if you're going to own that, then you are protecting all life mm-hmm. at all levels. Mm-hmm. And I think, agree. You know, it's unfortunate, but that seems to be how people relate to issues, mm-hmm. right? It's a real simplistic term, but look, this is a just and honorable cause, in my humble opinion.
Let's talk about life in terms of the ASK program. What are we asking parents to do? Here's a brochure that is put out. Awkward conversations come with being a parent. It's not easy to be a parent. Everybody knows that. But asking those awkward questions could save your child's life. Right. So you pick up the phone, and Tom is going to visit his new friend Mark. Never been to Mark's house before. You haven't met Mark's parents, but you have their phone number. So you call, and it's a little bit awkward. How are you going to initiate that conversation after you get by the introductions? Sure. And so in addition to Tom has peanut allergies, or your child doesn't have internet access, do they? You have to kind of swallow and say, please don't take offense, but for my child's safety, I need to know. Yeah. Are there guns in the home?
Yeah,
ask.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
Ask.
It's brilliant. I mean, look, if you're going to ask about the peanut allergy, you might as well ask if there's a gun that's not locked or not secured, mm-hmm. or just knowing if there's one in the house. Right. Mm-hmm.
But then you have, you know, the perfect opportunity to say, well, how about Mark comes to visit Tom, and then maybe we can have this conversation, you know, over coffee at another time.
I think that's brilliant. That's brilliant. How are you? How's that whole dissemination net outreach going?
I think I'm excited. I really am. When I left home tonight, I told my wife I am really excited about. And ask it's so easy. I heard one of the other guests talk about responsible gun owners. We know there are responsible gun owners, over half, 75, 80% maybe, who would no more think of leaving a loaded, unsecured firearm in their home than anything. But there are countless examples. You get on the internet, 3-year-old shoots twin brother, 3-year-old shoots grandfather.
Yeah, I think the statistic is 1 in 7, I have it somewhere, I think.
7 children, teens die every day from guns.
There you go. Every day. Mm-hmm. Every day. Mm-hmm. Those are young people of our society that their lives have been cut way too short.
Yeah, and we can get on that number. We can drive that number down simply by asking that question when your child's going to play. Grandparents, older siblings, whoever is caring for a child. Mm. So if audience members, people that are watching the show, have a place in the community where they exert some influence, if it's a PTA or if it's a Rotary or if it's a social service organization, ask to get material from the Ask campaign. Asking Saves Kids. AskingSavesKids.org. They'll send you whatever you need to have a presentation for your group and get the word out.
So we've got the website up, folks, for the folks at home. And they can go to the website and download information, get information, contact information as well.
Yes, they can.
Good.
It's a great program.
I think this is one of the things that we were trying to find to kind of educate people on that's out there, and I think it'll have a huge impact going forward. What sort of mechanism, infrastructure does the organization need? I mean, are you well funded? You've got
We're volunteers. There are a few that work for us for the issue in Richmond, but most of us are volunteers, and the numbers are increasing. I've only been at this for a year and a half. There was an article in the Washington Post that grabbed my attention, and I said, "That's it. I'm all in." And others are doing that. I recently was able to get a letter published in the Washington Post saying, "Please don't use the term gun control, use prevention of gun violence." I got a letter 3 days later, 5 paragraphs, very well stated position, signed his name. I thought, let me call this guy. He had a suggestion. He wanted to run a scorecard of the number of deaths to handguns and the number of crimes that were averted because of handguns. In other words, a good guy with a gun, and run those numbers against one another. So I called him up, and he turned out to be, he said, "Well, you know, I'm a little on in years. I'm a 95-year-old retired Navy veteran from World War II. We're going to lunch next Wednesday, and he may come with us to the vigil at the NRA headquarters." So, you know, the word is getting out, and people are signing on and are getting interested in changing the laws and changing the way we deal with this gun violence.
That's great. I'm just curious. It's a lot of great information. Why do you keep doing what you do? I mean, it's just, for me, there would be so many depression points in this, but what keeps you going? Why do you still fight?
There are, as I said, why, when I came back from the lobby day, why would you do this? Because it's so important. You look, there's somebody that puts up a website that we can look at, and they show you the pictures of these children who are killed. Every month, they have a strip of 6, 7, 8 children, and it runs for 4 or 5 strips. These are the children who have been killed in this country. I mean, they couldn't be cuter, nicer. We got to do it. We've got to do it.
Well, for me, this topic won't go away anytime soon, and I'm comforted by the fact knowing that there are people like yourselves, organizations like the Brady campaign, taking this initiative and taking it down to Richmond. I know you're going to have a lot of open ears. I don't know when the sort of horizon is on this, and when we make some progress on this. So hopefully, you know, with people like yourself, we'll get through some of this.
I think we'll make more progress if people know who their representatives are. Somebody asked me, "Why won't the politicians support what you're trying to do?" I said, "Who's your representative?" They said, "I don't know."
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you got to know who's voting the ways you want them to vote. And thank you so much for joining us again, Chair.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
I hope we don't see you anytime soon, and don't take that personally. Folks, thanks you for joining us, and we'll be back.